Looking for an all-in-one digital tool that can go from personal planning to large collaborative workspaces managing projects and tasks? In this video, I'll be comparing two powerful tools, Notion and Coda. As someone who's always excited to try out new tools, I wanted to examine their structure, key differences and similarities, as well as pricing to help you decide which one might work better for your workflow and needs. If you find this video useful, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Let's first go over the structure of Notion versus Coda. So with Notion, everything is structured into pages, and you can see all of your pages on the left-hand sidebar. And when you open something up, you can also see subpages inside, so you can easily nest them. And then inside of a page, you can add different kinds of blocks. So these are called blocks, and you can add, for example, databases as a block like this. You can have your database as well as other text inside of a Notion page. The other thing to note is that each database has properties, so you can add things like select, text, URLs, and all of these things when you add a new database. And then a database can also be viewed in different ways, so you can change the layout to things like board view, timeline view, calendar, and all of these ways to see your data. In terms of block options, you can type / and you can see all kinds of things that you can add, from call out boxes, quotes, bullet list, headings, and more. So that's essentially how Notion is built. So it's based off of pages, blocks, databases, and it's up to you how you organize them to fit your workflow. Next, if we go to Coda, the structure is very similar, but also slightly different. So with Coda, if I go now to my project and task manager, each of these are considered docs. And inside of each doc, we have various pages inside. So just like with the sidebar in Notion, but this one is contained to that particular doc. So in essence, it feels like a Notion workspace inside of each doc. And for example, with my project and task manager that I created in Coda, you can see various databases here as well. We have our tasks database here and projects. And instead of it being called blocks, each of these are considered lines. And for the columns here, they're considered columns, even if you are in this kind of card view like this. Each of these are called columns. But the structure is very similar to Notion. Next, let's go over the differences between databases and database views between Notion and Coda. So since their structures are so similar, these are also quite similar with each other, but there are some key differences. And one of the biggest things that I found was actually the database view tabs. So here we have unfinished, then we have done, and then a view all. In Coda, you're not able to add these kinds of tabbed layouts, and there are sort of workarounds where you can do something similar, but it's not designed like this, where you can save different kinds of filtering. So if I'm in Notion here and I go to my settings here, I can go to layout and then choose from all kinds of things: table, board, timeline, calendar, list, gallery, chart, and feed view, which is new. And then if I go ahead and go to Coda, for here, I go to options, and then I can see all of my options up top. So I can do table, card, detail, calendar, and then there's also form, timeline, chart, word cloud, and then board view. So in particular, I find that the word cloud is quite unique here, as well as the detail view. If I'm back in Notion, you'll notice that the list view is unique to Notion, as well as the feed view. So those are some differences with the way that you can view your databases. The other thing is when I click in, you'll notice that there's this layout up top to showcase all of these properties. And if I go to customize layout, I can do certain things like this, but I cannot move things into different columns within my layout. This is where Coda also differs and actually has a lot more options for its layout. So if I go to Coda and I open one up, and then I go to the edit layout option, I can do really a lot of things, from moving over my things into columns, and I can also save layouts so that I can use it for different situations as well. Next, let's go over what kinds of columns or properties that you can add to your databases. So with Coda, if I go to the plus sign here, I can add the relations to my other databases inside of Coda. So I can do relations. I can also add something like formulas, which also exists in Notion. And some other unique ones is this reaction. So you can add something like this. And then there's also Canvas. And Canvas is actually very unique because it pretty much allows you to do everything you can do in a main Coda page within that particular cell within that table. So in Coda, you think of everything as more of a spreadsheet than maybe in Notion, because Notion is full of pages. But if you want to do something similar in Coda, so you want to open up your notes, you'd have to add a canvas here. But the canvas actually allows you to do all kinds of things. You can even add tables, reference other databases directly in here to see them as well. Now, if I go back to Notion, let's say that I want to add a new property, which is what Coda calls columns. I can have all of these options here. These are all pretty much things that Coda also includes, such as the relation that you can do and the formulas. Something Notion has that Coda doesn't have, for example, would be things like the verification here. But these are all very similar. Next, let's go over text and other things you can add to your Notion and Coda pages. So in Notion, if I type / we can see that we can add things like AI meeting notes, linked view of other databases, dividers, images, video, audio, web bookmarks. With Notion, if I put a text here and then I highlight it, I get all of these options for the text editor, colors like this. If we go to Coda, we can see callout as well, table, and various templates I can add. And let's say that I put a text here, highlight it, then I'll see these kinds of color options for Coda, very similar to Notion. One big difference is that you can change your alignment with the text, which I think is something I wish Notion had. And a few other fun things that Coda has is the different kinds of dividers. So you can have wavy line separators, dashed lines, dotted, thick lines, and thinner lines. So I do really like that about Coda. And the other options are actually quite similar between the two. Next, let's go over formulas. With Coda and Notion, they both use formulas inside. In Notion, we can add that as a property. So if I go ahead and find formula here, I could add a formula. I can do all kinds of things like reference the projects and then the length, for example, to see how many projects I have here. So you can see one project in each of them. The formulas can be super useful in Notion. The one limitation is that I can't just type / and then add a formula in here. So it makes it difficult to create dashboards where you might want information reflected from various other databases. If we go over to Coda, you'll notice that I've created 0 tasks due today and 1 task overdue. And this is actually a formula that I can add anywhere on a Coda page. So here I can count if the current value is not done and the current value due date is today, then I count those. And then I have the counter here. Similarly, for the overdue ones, I also calculate them here so I can easily see them up top. You can do something similar in Notion, but it requires some relational databases and formulas, which can be even more tricky than simply adding out the formulas here, and it doesn't look as nice. Next, let's talk about automations. With Coda, it's more of a global thing, so you can add your automation here and then go to the automations and see all of them here. It's very similar to Notion in that you select a trigger and then you can run different kinds of actions. The differences here are that you can have the automation push buttons, for example. And I do think that there's more options with the Coda automations as opposed to the Notion automations. And you might be able to do things that you would normally require a third-party tool to accomplish in Notion. So for example, I also have these buttons which can run automations, and you can do things like copy page to doc, copy to clipboard. You can do all kinds of things, especially with the integrations, like creating an event to your Google Calendar through the button without having to do complex automation setup with third-party tools. So if I go over to Notion and, for example, I add a button, I can do similar things. I add an action. These are my options for that. Other automations through the databases. So these are database-wide triggers. So instead of the whole page, I'm actually running the trigger based on single databases. Next, I wanted to talk about the overall design of Notion versus Coda. Coda feels a little bit more cluttered for me as a avid Notion user, just because there's so many options everywhere. Also, the color design and all of these things are maybe a little bit less minimal than you can accomplish with a Notion design. But as you can see, this looks pretty similar to how Notion looks as well. And if you go to the settings here, you can do actually quite a lot, minimize even more than maybe you can in Notion. So you can even hide the page name if you want. You can also choose your page width from narrow, standard to wide. And you can also choose all of these things like the content alignment. The font, there's only 2 options here like this, compared to Notion, which has 3 options. You can also choose how the new pages have their page options. So the page name and icon, all of these you can set up in advance so that any new page you create inside of here is going to have the same setup. So that's different from Notion. You have to continuously always do the same setup when you create a new page, which can get very tedious. You can even change the database titles to be italic, underline, headings. So there's so many options with Coda that you can really have fun with your own design. So if we go over to Notion, if I type dividers, I can only have one kind of divider. And if I go now to my page settings, you can see 3 kinds of fonts. And then there's only small text, full width, like this. You have customized page options here, but compared to Coda, it's way less options. If I want to, for example, change the title text here, I won't be able to do that with Notion, as you can see. So overall, I would say that Notion has a much more minimal design compared to Coda. Next, let's talk about various integrations. So Notion also has many kinds of integrations that you can add to your Notion pages. If I just type /, you can see all kinds of options over here that you can add. Most of these are mainly for embeds, which means that you can basically just embed things from other apps. But with more direct integration, you can go to the connections inside of Notion. And in the settings, if you go to connections, you can see the options here. But it is a bit limited in the sense that you can't, for example, have a 2-way sync between your Google Calendar. And it feels like the integrations are not as robust sometimes, and you might have to create your own automations using third-party tools. With Coda, I would say that the integrations feel a lot more robust. So for example, I was able to add my Google Calendar into my Coda page, and then it's actually doing a 2-way sync as well. You do need to pay for different kinds of packs, which are the integrations. So if I click insert here and then go to packs, you can see all kinds of things that you can do here. And I would say that there's a lot more possibilities here than you would be able to achieve directly from Notion. Now let's compare the pricing between Coda versus Notion. So Coda has a very interesting pricing structure in that doc makers are paid. So people who can create new docs and pages are paid, but then editors and viewers are always free. So if you only have one admin, it could make things quite cheap for you instead of having to pay for everyone as a member. If you're just you and your team getting started, you can definitely get started for free. If you want more robust features like 30-day version history, hidden pages, custom domains, and also have various packs, which are the integrations like having the Gmail, the Slack, the Google Calendar, all of these are included for $10 a month per doc maker, so the Pro plan. And I think that's very reasonable. Then we have the team plan. And then we have an enterprise plan here. If we go over to Notion's pricing, then it's also very similar. The plus plan is $10. There's basic integrations. And then there's also business plan. And then there's enterprise plans. So if you're just starting out, both of them are free. So I think that in that sense, it's very similar. I would say that the integration to the Google Calendar is a lot better in Coda. That's something to consider if that's important for you. And one thing with Coda is that the AI included is limited for the credits. So all of these plans have limitations, as opposed to with Notion, the AI is unlimited if you have business and enterprise. My final thoughts after trying Coda out is that I'm genuinely impressed by Coda as a seasoned Notion user. I felt like Coda had many things that I wish Notion could do, such as the formulas being accessible anywhere, advanced customizations, and there's so much more that I wasn't able to share just because there's so many things in Coda that you can do with it. But it was also interesting because I realized that with more options in Coda, it becomes even more complex to set up depending on what's needed. I won't be personally switching to Coda, but I might try creating more docs in Coda to see what's possible. If you're not sure which one's right for you, my suggestion would be that if you value a minimalist style and don't need complex formulas and automations, then it could be great to stick to Notion. If you feel like the options in Notion are not enough and you need to be able to have more advanced formulas, customizations, integrations, then I would recommend trying out Coda. If you want to try out the project and task manager that I made in Coda, you can find the link to copy it below. As usual, you can find premium and free Notion templates from my website. Let me know your thoughts if you've tried Coda or Notion, and I hope to see you all in the next video.